The night sky above Musutafu was unusually clear. Stars glittered above the sleeping city. Streetlights hummed quietly. Patrol heroes walked their routes. For a moment, everything felt calm. Another peaceful night under the protection of Hero Society. And then the sky tore open. A streak of black fire ripped across the atmosphere like a blade slicing through darkness. It wasn't a normal meteor. The object moved too fast, too controlled. The air behind it warped violently, leaving a trail of burning crimson light that stretched across the sky. People across the city looked up. Cars screeched to a halt. Civilians pointed in fear. And high above the city, on the training fields of UA High School, several students had a perfect view of the incoming anomaly. Midoriya, a voice asked nervously. Please tell me that's normal. Standing near the railing, Izuku Midoriya froze as he watched the blazing object descend. His analytical mind immediately began racing. Trajectory, velocity, impact radius. It's not normal, Midoriya whispered. Not even close. The object slammed into the outskirts of Musutafu with a thunderous explosion. The ground shook. A shockwave blasted outward through nearby forests, flattening trees and sending debris flying into the air. A massive crater formed where the meteor had landed, smoke and dust spiraling toward the sky. Within seconds, emergency alarms began echoing across the city. Hero agencies mobilized instantly. To them, this wasn't just a meteor strike. It could be a villain attack. Minutes later, the crater site was surrounded. Pro-heroes stood at the edge of the smoking impact zone, their silhouettes illuminated by flashing emergency lights. No one rushed in immediately. Something about the impact felt wrong. One hero stepped forward carefully, peering down into the crater. At the center of the crater, something moved. The dust slowly began to settle. And standing in the middle of the destruction was not a meteor. It was a figure. Short, black, outlined with streaks of crimson red. The creature slowly lifted its head. Red eyes glowed through the smoke. The heroes instinctively tensed. Because whatever this thing was, it clearly wasn't human. The figure staggered slightly, as if regaining balance. Quills curved backward like blades. Golden rings hovered around its wrists. Its body radiated a strange, unstable energy that flickered like distorted lightning. The being looked around slowly, scanning the unfamiliar world. Confusion flickered across its face. Then it spoke. Where is this planet? The heroes stared in stunned silence. One of them whispered quietly over the communicator. Control. We have visual confirmation. Unknown life form detected. Back at UA, the students watched the live emergency broadcast from the common room. The footage from nearby drones showed the crater and the mysterious figure standing inside it. Midoriya leaned forward, eyes wide. That energy output, he murmured. It doesn't resemble any Quirk type I've studied. His notebook was already open. Pencil flying across the page. Energy displacement. Spatial distortion. Unknown physiology. Beside him, Katsuki Bakugo scoffed loudly. Shh, who cares what it is? If it dropped out of the sky like that, it's obviously a villain. Bakugo cracked his knuckles. Send me down there. I'll blast it back into space. Midoriya didn't respond, because something about the footage was bothering him. The creature didn't look aggressive. It looked disoriented. Like someone who had woken up in the wrong world. Back at the crater, the heroes finally made their decision. "Unknown individual," one hero shouted. "You are surrounded. Identify yourself immediately." The black and red figure slowly turned towards them. Its glowing red eyes narrowed slightly. Then it spoke again. "My name is Shadow." The heroes exchanged uneasy glances. "Shadow?" one of them repeated. "That your villain name?" Shadow's gaze hardened. "I am not a villain." His voice carried a strange confidence, as if he had said those words countless times before. But before anyone could respond, the air suddenly distorted. A low hum vibrated through the crater. The heroes stepped back instinctively. "What's happening?" Shadow looked down at his hands. Crimson energy began spiraling around his body like unstable flames. His expression shifted from confusion to alarm. "This world, it's interfering with chaos energy." The ground beneath him warped violently. Space itself seemed to bend inward. The heroes realized something was about to happen. "Everyone move," someone shouted. But it was already too late. Shadow's body suddenly blurred. Reality twisted like a ripple in water. And in a flash of crimson light, he vanished. Gone. No explosion. No escape trail. Just empty air where he had been standing seconds ago. The heroes stared in shock. Did he teleport? One of them checked the scanners frantically. Energy readings were spiking across the city. Because Shadow hadn't just teleported. He had been launched. Across Musutafu. High above the rooftops, a ripple in space appeared for a fraction of a second. And the mysterious being known as Shadow hurtled uncontrollably toward the heart of the city. A stranger from another universe, with power that this world did not yet understand. And somewhere far below, hero society was about to realize something terrifying. The balance of their world had just changed forever. Across Musutafu, every hero agency was now on alert. The footage played again and again across tactical screens. The black comet, the massive crater, and the mysterious figure standing in the center of it all, before reality itself seemed to bend around him. Then, the moment that confused every analyst in the room. The instant he vanished. Not a leap. Not a burst of speed. Space itself had twisted, and the being had simply disappeared. Inside a command center connected to UA High School, pro heroes studied the recording frame by frame. Energy graphs spiked wildly across their monitors. One analyst shook his head slowly. "This doesn't match any Quirk classification." Another technician zoomed into the distortion where the teleportation occurred. No propulsion signature. No momentum displacement. He looked up nervously. It's like he didn't move through space. He rewrote it. The room fell silent. Because if that was true, then this wasn't just another villain. Elsewhere inside UA, teachers were having their own discussion. Leaning casually against the wall, his tired eyes half open, Shota Aizawa stared at the screen. The replay showed Shadow standing in the crater. Energy flickering around him. Aizawa crossed his arms slowly. Someone nearby asked. "What do you think?" Aizawa didn't answer immediately. Instead, he watched the moment when Shadow vanished. Then he spoke quietly. "If that power isn't a quirk," he paused, "then my erasure might not work on him." That possibility alone made the room tense. Because Aizawa's quirk was one of the most reliable counters to dangerous abilities. But if this being's power came from somewhere else entirely. Hero Society might be dealing with something they didn't understand. Meanwhile, in the UA dorm common room, the students were watching the same footage, and one person in particular had already filled 3 notebook pages. Izuku Midoriya leaned forward with intense focus, muttering as his pencil raced across paper. Spatial manipulation, energy distortion, unknown biology. His eyes gleamed with fascination. His power system doesn't resemble Quirks at all. Around him, the other students exchanged glances. Midoriya looked both excited and deeply concerned. If he can manipulate space itself, Midoriya continued, thinking aloud, then theoretically his mobility would exceed most speed-based Quirks. His pencil stopped suddenly. But something was wrong. The others looked at him. "What do you mean?" someone asked. Midoriya pointed at the screen. Right before he disappeared, the energy destabilized. It spiked violently. He frowned. That suggests the power wasn't fully under control. From the couch nearby, a loud scoff interrupted him. "Shh." Katsuki Bakugo leaned back with crossed arms. "You nerds are overthinking it." Bakugo glared at the screen. "If that thing's strong, then we fight it." His palms cracked with tiny sparks of explosive energy. "That's how you figure out what it can do." Midoriya opened his mouth to argue, but he stopped. Because part of him knew Bakugo wasn't entirely wrong. Eventually, someone would have to confront this mysterious being. High above the streets of Musutafu, a ripple appeared in the air. For a brief second, space bent inward. And then, Shadow fell out of the distortion. He landed hard on a rooftop, sliding several meters before catching himself. The city lights stretched endlessly around him. Towering buildings, moving vehicles, crowds of civilians. Shadow slowly stood up, his red eyes scanning the unfamiliar world. This planet, he clenched his fist. It's not Mobius. The chaos energy around him flickered unsteadily. Something about this dimension felt different. He leapt from the rooftop, landing silently in an empty alley below. A nearby screen flashed brightly with a broadcast. Shadow glanced toward it. The screen displayed an image of a smiling hero rescuing civilians from a burning building. Bold text appeared beneath it. "The symbol of peace saves the day." Shadow stared. Heroes. The word sounded unfamiliar on his tongue. In his world, power wasn't organized into celebrity figures. There were soldiers, protectors, warriors, but this looked like something else entirely. A society built around admiration for power. Suddenly, Shadow's eyes narrowed, because he felt something. A pulse. Faint, but unmistakable. Energy. He looked down at his hands. Red sparks of chaos energy flickered across his gloves. But the energy wasn't stable. It was reacting to something nearby. Shadow closed his eyes briefly, focusing his senses. The pulse became clearer. Everywhere around him, people were using their quirks. Tiny bursts of power, flashes of abilities, energy signatures scattered across the entire city. And every time one activated, his chaos energy reacted. It pulsed. It intensified. Shadow's eyes slowly opened. Interesting. This world's power system wasn't rejecting his abilities. It was feeding them. Chaos energy was responding to quirks like fuel feeding a fire. But there was one problem. The reaction was becoming stronger. Much stronger. And if Shadow couldn't stabilize it, The next surge of chaos energy might not just teleport him across the city. It might tear something else apart. High above the skyline, faint red lightning flickered around Shadow's silhouette. And somewhere deep within the city's villain underworld, sensors had just detected something impossible. A power source that didn't belong to this world. And now, everyone was starting to notice. Night had fully settled over Musutafu, but the city was far from quiet. Sirens echoed through distant streets. News drones buzzed above intersections. Hero patrols had doubled across the district ever since the mysterious black comet had fallen from the sky. But several kilometers away from the city center, inside a poorly lit industrial district, another event was already unfolding. And no one from Hero Society had arrived yet. A heavy transport truck rumbled slowly down the empty road. Its cargo doors were reinforced with thick metal locks. Inside the container were prototype support items, experimental hero equipment being moved between research facilities, which meant the truck had become a perfect target. 3 masked criminals stepped into the road. The truck screeched to a halt. "Everyone out!" one of them shouted, his arm suddenly expanding into a massive stone hammer. A Quirk. The driver panicked and jumped out of the vehicle. Another criminal stretched his arms like rubber cables, ripping the cargo doors open with ease. A third villain grinned as electricity crackled across his palms. "Jackpot," he said. Inside the truck were dozens of advanced support items. Black market gold. But just as they began pulling crates from the container, a quiet voice spoke behind them. "You're wasting your time." The villains froze. They slowly turned. Standing at the far end of the road, illuminated by a flickering streetlight, was a small black figure. Red stripes glowed faintly across his quills. Golden rings hovered around his wrists. His crimson eyes glowed in the darkness. Shadow. The criminals exchanged confused glances. "What the hell is that thing?" one muttered. Another laughed. "Probably some new sidekick hero." The villain with the stone hammer stepped forward. "Hey, mascot," he said mockingly. "You lost?" Shadow didn't respond. His gaze simply moved across the scene. The damaged truck. The terrified driver. The stolen equipment. His voice came out calm. Cold. "Crime." The criminals blinked. "What?" Shadow's eyes narrowed slightly. "In my world, criminals like you didn't last long." The electric villain snorted. "Oh yeah?" He raised his hand. Lightning sparked violently between his fingers. "Well, welcome to this world." He fired the attack. A bolt of electricity shot across the street and struck empty air. The villains blinked. Huh? Because Shadow was gone. A blur of black and red streaked across the street. The electric villain suddenly flew backward, crashing into a parked car with a violent crunch. Before the others could react, Shadow appeared behind the stone-armed criminal. The villain swung his massive arm instinctively. Too slow. Shadow ducked beneath the swing. One precise strike. The villain collapsed instantly. The third criminal tried to stretch his rubber-like arms to grab him, but Shadow moved faster than his eyes could follow. 3 strikes. 3 seconds. 3 villains dropped to the pavement. Silence returned to the street. The truck driver stared in disbelief. What are you?" Shadow didn't answer. He simply turned away. To him, the fight had barely been worth noticing. But suddenly, sirens. Loud. Close. Several patrol vehicles screeched around the corner. Bright spotlights flooded the street. Pro heroes jumped from the vehicles instantly. Everyone freeze! The lead hero raised his weapon. They had received reports of a violent fight in the area. But what they saw confused them immediately. 3 unconscious criminals, a damaged convoy, and one mysterious black figure standing calmly in the middle of it all. The heroes immediately tensed, because the description matched the unknown being from the meteor incident. One hero spoke into his communicator. "Control, we found him." Another stepped forward cautiously. "Unknown individual," he said firmly. "Step away from the suspects." Shadow turned slowly. His red eyes scanned the arriving heroes. Colorful costumes, symbolic designs, professional stances, heroes. The same strange concept he had seen on the city screens. One hero whispered to another, "That's definitely the meteor creature." "Look at the energy readings." Shadow could feel it too. They're quirks. Different abilities. Different power signatures. All reacting faintly with the chaos energy inside him. But before he could analyze it further, more heroes arrived. Within seconds, the entire street was surrounded. Weapons ready. Quirks activated. The lead hero stepped forward again. "Unknown combatant," he announced firmly. "You are suspected of assault and involvement in this incident." Shadow's expression hardened slightly. "Assault?" He glanced briefly at the unconscious criminals, then back at the heroes. Their conclusion was clear. They thought he was the attacker. The hero raised his hand. "Unknown combatant. You are under arrest." Silence fell across the street. Shadow slowly lifted his head, red eyes glowing brighter in the darkness. For the first time since arriving in this world, he looked annoyed, and the heroes surrounding him suddenly realized something unsettling. They weren't dealing with an ordinary criminal. They were confronting something far more dangerous. Something that didn't follow the rules of their world. The street fell into a tense silence. Broken glass littered the pavement. The transport truck's headlights flickered weakly, illuminating the unconscious criminals sprawled across the road. Around them, pro-heroes formed a tightening circle. At the center of it all stood one figure, Shadow. His crimson eyes slowly moved from hero to hero, analyzing their movements, their stances, their breathing. Every instinct he had told him these people were fighters, but not the kind he was used to. Their energy signatures felt strange, different. Not raw energy like chaos power. Something biological. Something embedded within them. The lead hero stepped forward cautiously. "Last warning," he said firmly. "Stand down." Shadow didn't move. His gaze shifted briefly to the fallen criminals, then back to the heroes. "I already stopped your criminals," he said calmly. "But now, you're attacking me." Another hero scoffed. "Yeah, nice story." Flames ignited along the man's arms as his quirk activated. Villains say that all the time. Shadow's expression hardened slightly. Villain? The word felt unfamiliar. But before he could respond, now! The heroes attacked. A blast of fire roared across the street. At the same moment, another hero slammed both fists into the pavement. The ground cracked, launching chunks of asphalt towards Shadow like cannonballs. Shadow vanished. A red streak flashed across the battlefield. The fire blast tore through empty air. The flying rubble shattered against a nearby wall. Then suddenly, Shadow reappeared behind one of the heroes. He didn't punch. He didn't strike with full force, just a light shove. The hero stumbled forward several meters before collapsing face first into the pavement. The other heroes froze for a split second. Did he? He moved! No, he teleported. Another hero with enhanced speed launched forward, blurring towards Shadow with incredible momentum. For a moment, the street filled with streaks of motion. The speed hero attacked again and again. Punch, kick, strike. Shadow dodged every blow effortlessly. To him, the attacks felt slow, predictable, but something else was happening. The heroes weren't fighting individually anymore. They were coordinating. A water-based Quirk user flooded the street, forcing Shadow to adjust his footing. Another hero launched metal cables from his wrists, trying to trap him. A shockwave Quirk blasted the ground, forcing Shadow to leap backward. For the first time in the battle, Shadow was being pushed, not overwhelmed, but pressured. His eyes narrowed slightly. These powers. He dodged another shockwave. They're not energy. He slipped between two incoming attacks with precise movement. They originate from your bodies. The heroes continued advancing. Because whatever this creature was, they couldn't let it escape. One hero shouted into his communicator, "Where is Aizawa?" And as if summoned by the call, a figure landed silently on a nearby rooftop. Wrapped in his capture weapon, hair drifting slightly in the wind, Shoda Aizawa. His tired eyes immediately locked onto Shadow. Aizawa studied the battlefield for only a few seconds. Unconscious criminals, disoriented heroes, and the unknown being dodging attacks with impossible precision. Then he made his decision. "Everyone fall back," Aizawa said calmly. Some heroes hesitated. But now! The authority in his voice made them move instantly. The battlefield cleared. Shadow looked up. Their eyes met. Aizawa activated his quirk. His hair lifted slightly. His gaze sharpened. Erasure. Any Quirk user caught in his sight would instantly lose access to their power. Across the battlefield, the other heroes watched with anticipation. If the creature's power was a Quirk, this would end the fight instantly. Shadow suddenly felt something strange. A subtle shift, like a system attempting to shut something down. He tilted his head slightly. "What is this?" Aizawa maintained eye contact. Waiting for the unknown power to collapse, for the teleportation to stop, for the strange energy to fade. Seconds passed. Nothing changed. Shadow flexed his hand. Chaos energy flickered across his fingers. Uninterrupted. Unrestricted. The heroes stared in confusion. One whispered nervously, "Why isn't it working?" Aizawa's eyes narrowed slightly. His quirk had never failed like this before. Never. Shadow studied him curiously. "You tried to disable my power." Aizawa finally spoke. Quietly. Almost to himself. That. His gaze remained locked onto Shadow. Isn't a quirk. The realization sent a ripple of tension through the battlefield. Because if Aizawa couldn't erase it, then Hero Society was facing something entirely outside their understanding. Something their systems weren't built to counter. And standing calmly in the center of the street, Shadow slowly lowered into a ready stance. The chaos energy around him began to flicker again, stronger than before. And the pro-heroes suddenly realized something terrifying. The fight had only just begun. The tension in the street snapped like a tightened wire. Broken pavement. Flickering lights. heroes forming a circle around a being they did not understand. At the center stood Shadow. The crimson energy flickering around his body had grown stronger now, reacting violently to the quirk users surrounding him. Every ability activation sent faint ripples through the chaos energy within him. To the heroes, it looked like the creature was powering up. To Shadow, it felt like something else entirely. Instability. Across the battlefield, Shota Aizawa maintained eye contact, his erasure still active. Yet nothing about the mysterious fighter's power had changed, which meant one thing. This was not a quirk battle. The lead hero raised his arm again. "Unknown individual," he shouted. "Stand down immediately." Shadow's eyes shifted slowly from hero to hero. Each one carried different energy signatures. Fire, water, kinetic bursts, enhancement, strange biological mutations. A world where power had evolved inside the human body. He spoke quietly. "You rely on powers you were born with." No one moved. "You organize yourselves around them." The chaos energy around his body pulsed brighter. "But you misunderstand something." The heroes tightened their stance. Shadow lowered slightly into a battle posture. Power doesn't come from biology. A burst of crimson energy erupted around him. It comes from control. The moment the words left his mouth, 3 heroes attacked simultaneously. A blast of fire roared across the street. Metal cables shot forward like spears. A shockwave cracked the pavement beneath Shadow's feet. And for a split second, everything slowed. Not visually, not physically. But to Shadow, time itself stretched. Every motion became predictable. Every attack became a path he could step around. Chaos energy surged through his body. His voice whispered one word. Chaos. Reality warped. Control. The world broke. In an instant, Shadow vanished. Not with a blur. Not with speed. Space itself folded. One moment he stood at the center of the street. The next, he appeared behind the fire user. A precise strike knocked the hero's weapon from his hands. Before the man even realized what happened, Shadow was already gone. Another distortion. He appeared beside the cable hero. 2 fingers struck a pressure point. The cables dropped instantly. Then another warp. Another jump. Another strike. Across the battlefield, the heroes watched in stunned disbelief as the unknown fighter began appearing everywhere at once. He moved without travel, appearing, disappearing. Each teleport lasted less than a fraction of a second. Yet every time he appeared, another hero lost their weapon. Another stance collapsed. Another attack was interrupted before it could even land. High above the battlefield, students from UA High School were watching through an emergency drone broadcast. And one student leaned so close to the screen, he almost forgot to breathe. Izuku Midoriya stared in shock. That isn't speed." His voice trembled with awe. "He's not moving fast." Midoriya's pencil trembled in his hand. "He's skipping distance." On screen, Shadow appeared in the middle of 3 heroes, disarmed them in one motion, then vanished again. Midoriya's eyes widened. He's teleporting across the battlefield. Beside him, Katsuki Bakugo leaned forward. Shh. But even Bakugo's eyes showed something rare. Respect. Because the fight was no longer even. Within seconds, every hero in the street had been disarmed. Not seriously injured. Just completely neutralized. Shadow appeared once more at the center of the road. The chaos energy flickered violently around him. For a brief moment, silence returned. The heroes slowly stood back up, stunned. Some were breathing heavily. Others simply stared, because none of them had even been able to follow what just happened. But something was wrong. Shadow's breathing had changed. The chaos energy around him flickered unevenly now, wildly, unstable. His hand suddenly clenched. What? The energy surged again, this time painfully. A violent pulse shot through his body. Shadow staggered. The heroes noticed immediately. He's losing control. But this wasn't loss of control. It was something worse. Shadow's vision blurred for a second. His body suddenly felt heavier. Slower, like gravity itself had increased. He looked down at his hands. The chaos energy was fading. Not completely, but weakening. For the first time since arriving in this universe. Shadow dropped to one knee. The pavement cracked beneath him. The heroes froze in confusion. Across the drone broadcast, Midoriya whispered quietly. He's exhausted. But Midoriya wasn't entirely right. Shadow slowly lifted his head. His crimson eyes scanned the unfamiliar city around him. The strange energy of this world. The constant presence of quirks. And then the realization struck him. Not exhaustion. Not damage. Something far more dangerous. Shadow whispered quietly to himself. This world. His fingers tightened against the pavement. His draining chaos energy. And if that was true, then the longer he stayed here, the weaker he would become. The lights inside the underground containment room hummed quietly. Reinforced walls surrounded the chamber. Thick steel, quirk-resistant materials, and multiple security cameras watching from every angle. Hero Society was taking no chances, because sitting in the center of the room was something they did not understand. Shadow sat calmly on the metal bench, arms resting on his knees. Restraints had been placed around his wrists earlier. They hadn't lasted long. The metal had warped and cracked the moment chaos energy flickered through his body. So instead, the heroes had settled for observation. Outside the reinforced glass wall, several teachers from UA's high school watched carefully. Standing near the front was Shota Aizawa, arms crossed, eyes heavy but focused. He hasn't attempted escape, one faculty member said. Aizawa nodded slightly. He's calculating. Inside the room, Shadow slowly lifted his head. He could feel them watching, studying him like an experiment. But none of it bothered him. What interested him more was the strange energy he continued sensing everywhere in this world. Quirks. Biological power sources. Messy. Uncontrolled. Emotional. A system built on chance. Suddenly, the door behind the observation room opened. A group of students stepped inside. The famous Class 1A. And immediately, the atmosphere changed. Because for them, this wasn't just a dangerous situation. It was the most unbelievable thing they had ever seen. Standing near the glass, Izuku Midoriya leaned forward with intense curiosity. His notebook was already open, pages filled with frantic observations. His physiology is incredible, Midoriya whispered. Non-human skeletal structure, enhanced muscle density, and that energy source? His eyes lit up. It's completely different from Quirks. Inside the room, Shadow's gaze shifted slightly. He had noticed the students, one of them in particular, the green-haired one. His energy signature was unusual. Powerful, but restrained. Standing beside Midoriya, Katsuki Bakugo crossed his arms impatiently. Shh. Bakugo glared at the glass. So that's the thing that knocked out a bunch of pros? Midoriya nodded nervously. Yes, but it wasn't brute force. It was spatial manipulation. Bakugo cracked his knuckles. Good. Midoriya blinked. Good? Bakugo smirked slightly. Means he might actually be worth fighting. Inside the containment room, Shadow slowly stood up. The students instinctively stepped back from the glass, even though there was a barrier between them. Even though heroes surrounded the facility, something about the being in that room felt dangerous. Shadow walked closer to the observation window. His red eyes studied each of them one by one. Young, inexperienced, yet each one carried the same strange energy signature. Quirks. But something else stood out too. Determination, emotion, purpose. Shadow tilted his head slightly. These are your soldiers? He asked calmly. The students exchanged confused glances. Midoriya quickly shook his head. No, we're students. Shadow's expression didn't change. You train children to fight. Midoriya hesitated. Well, yes, but for what purpose? His question was simple, direct, but it carried genuine curiosity. Midoriya opened his mouth to answer, but another voice cut in first. Bakugo stepped forward, glaring through the glass. We fight because we want to be the strongest. His palms sparked slightly with explosive energy, and because villains like you need to be stopped. Shadow's eyes shifted toward him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Shadow said calmly, You misunderstand. Bakugo's brow twitched. Oh yeah? Shadow turned slightly, looking out at the city lights visible through the distant facility windows. I'm not a villain. Bakugo scoffed loudly. Then what are you? Shadow didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied the students again, their reactions, their emotions, their loyalty to something called Hero Society. It made no logical sense. In his world, power existed for survival, for protection, for war. But these humans, they risked their lives voluntarily. For strangers, Shadow's gaze returned to Midoriya, the one who seemed to understand power more than the others. He spoke quietly. Tell me something. Midoriya straightened slightly. Shadow's voice carried genuine curiosity now. Not hostility, not anger, just a question. Why do you risk your life? His red eyes locked onto Midoriya's. For strangers? The room fell silent. Even Bakugo didn't interrupt. Midoriya blinked once. Twice. Then slowly, he smiled. Not confidently. Not heroically. Just honestly. Because someone has to. Shadow's eyes narrowed slightly. Midoriya continued. If people only saved the ones they knew, then most of the world would be left alone. He rubbed the back of his head nervously. So heroes help everyone. Even strangers. Even people they've never met. Even people who might never thank them. The explanation was simple, but something about it made Shadow pause. Because in all the worlds he had fought to protect, very few people had ever believed something like that. And for the first time since arriving in this strange universe, the ultimate life form found himself thinking, perhaps this world's definition of strength was different from his own. Far below the streets of Musutafu, in a darkened warehouse lit only by flickering fluorescent lights, a network of screens displayed images from the city above. Footage of chaos, of incredible speed, of a black and red figure moving faster than thought itself. Shadow's actions had left the pro-heroes bewildered, their quirks ineffective against him, and the world above buzzed with rumors of an unknown ultimate life form. And in the underworld, whispers travel faster than heroes ever could. Tamura Shigaraki paced in front of the screens, fingertips brushing over the walls covered in old battle scars and graffiti, remnants of his reign of terror, of the League's previous exploits. His crimson eyes gleamed with anticipation. "Do you see this?" Shigaraki asked, voice low and rough, though trembling with excitement. "This being? He doesn't belong to this world. Not a quirk user, not a hero, nothing we've ever fought before." On the screens, Shadow appeared in a frozen frame, a faint purple aura pulsing subtly around him, his posture calm, yet radiating a sense of threat that words could never capture. Dabi, leaning against the stack of crates, smirked. "I've seen my share of strong people, but this is on another level." He disarmed pros without even touching them, and he collapsed after only a short burst of energy. "He's fragile, maybe, but a weapon like this in our hands?" Shigaraki's lips curled into a grin that sent shivers down the spine of everyone present. "Exactly. Imagine if he fought for us. The world would crumble before we even touched it. Hero society would fall like dominoes." But then, from the shadows, a presence loomed. All for One sat back in his chair, one arm resting casually while the other adjusted the mask covering half his face. He had heard the whispers as well, the murmurs of a power that could eclipse even the quirks he had cultivated and stolen over decades. And yet, there was something unsettling. "Power beyond quirks," All for One murmured. His voice was calm, almost amused, but it carried the weight of centuries of manipulation. "Yet, it is not something I can take. Not with my abilities. This is something different, something intrinsic, something untouchable." The room went silent for a moment. The members of the League suddenly aware that their excitement might be tempered by caution. Shigaraki's smile faltered slightly. Then we make him ours another way." His eyes gleamed with obsession. "If we cannot steal him, we break him." All for One leaned forward, the faint light catching the metallic ridges on his mask. A slow, deliberate smile formed beneath it. "Precisely. Only by bending him, by challenging his very sense of morality, can we turn such power into chaos. And I know exactly how to do it." Himiko Toga, twirling her knives nervously, tilted her head. "Break him? How? He looks dangerous." "All for One," Shigaraki said, his hands clenching. "You mean confront him directly?" "Not yet," All for One replied calmly. "We do not need to reveal ourselves. Shadows are drawn to conflict. They sense weakness. They sense opportunity. We plant seeds now. Whispers, fear, curiosity. Let him meet challenges that test more than his strength. Test his will, his ideals, his sense of justice." Shigaraki's grin returned, wider and darker than before. "And when he bends, when he fights for us," his voice dropped to a whisper, "then we'll have the ultimate weapon." Dabi crossed his arms. "Or we could just wait for him to make a mistake. He's not from this world. He doesn't understand humans, hero culture. That's a weakness in itself." All for One's smile deepened. "Indeed, but never underestimate the lessons pain and manipulation can teach. The world itself is a crucible, and Shadow, His eyes gleamed with intent. Is about to enter it. The cameras in the warehouse shifted to a live feed of UA High. Shadow's form appeared once more, contained for observation, but unaware that a web of schemes was beginning to form around him. Shigaraki's voice cut through the hum of electronics. Prepare the League. We move when the time is right. Everything else is just preparation. The tension in the room thickened, charged with anticipation, with the faint, unspoken acknowledgement that whatever came next could change the balance of the world. And then, All for One's low, almost casual whisper echoed in the minds of all present. Then we must break him. Instead, outside the city slept, unaware. But in the shadows beneath it, a storm was forming. One that even the brightest heroes above could not yet see. A storm that would test the very definition of strength, of morality, and of what it meant to be human. Or something beyond. And somewhere in the heart of UA High, Shadow sensed a new presence, faint but deliberate, a curiosity born of malice. Unseen, unstoppable, waiting. The training grounds of UA High were alive with tension. The usual clang of metal weights and the rhythmic pounding of students' exercises were replaced by an uneasy silence, broken only by the low hum of anticipation. Today, a storm was coming, not from the sky, but from a confrontation that would shake every student watching. At the center of the arena stood Shadow, the ultimate lifeform, contained only by his own choice to refrain from outright destruction. His crimson eyes glimmered faintly beneath the scarlet streaks of his quills. Calm, calculating, silent. From the opposite side, Katsuki Bakugo stomped forward, fists crackling with explosive energy. His glare burned hotter than the midday sun. He wasn't here to study. He wasn't here to question the world or even to analyze Shadow's power. He was here to fight, to prove, to dominate. I'm not letting anyone be stronger than me, Bakugo growled, voice sharp as steel. Especially not some alien hedgehog showing off like he owns the place. Shadow tilted his head slightly, studying the fiery young hero with the faintest flicker of interest. He had seen strength before, but there was a rawness here, a reckless determination that intrigued him. Bakugo launched first, blasting the ground beneath him to rocket forward at a speed that blurred the edges of reality. Shadow didn't flinch. Instead, he activated a subtle burst of chaos control, teleporting mere inches away from the explosion center, letting the blast crack the concrete harmlessly behind him. The clash began in earnest. Bakugo's attacks were relentless, precision blasts, rapid bursts, strategic maneuvers designed to corner, overwhelm, and outpace. Shadow responded with a fluidity that was almost unnatural, teleporting, phasing, and striking with bursts of power so fast they left after images in the air. Not bad, Shadow murmured, his voice calm, almost bored, but not without recognition. You fight like someone who has something to prove. Bakugo froze, mid-lunge, blood roaring through his ears, his face contorted in fury. What did you just say? He screamed, detonating the ground beneath him again, sending a shockwave that lifted dust and debris into a swirling storm around them. The students around the arena gasped. Midoriya, notebook in hand, scribbled furiously. I've never seen Bakugo this angry. And Shadow, he's analyzing him like a real strategist. Shadow's quills glowed faintly in rhythm with his chaos energy, each movement deliberate, conserving strength while testing Bakugo's limits. And Bakugo pushed harder than any hero had yet. Every strike, every explosion, every desperate maneuver was aimed at one thing: proving dominance. Shadow's first sign of respect came subtly, a brief nod when he dodged a particularly vicious mid-air blast, and a soft, almost inaudible breath that carried amusement rather than condescension. Bakugo's rage only intensified. I don't care who you are. I don't care what planet you're from. He ignited his palms in a brilliant flash, launching himself straight at Shadow with an explosive roar. Shadow met him in midair, teleporting, dodging, and countering with precise force that sent shockwaves across the training ground. The arena trembled beneath the impact of their powers, dust and debris swirling like a storm in a desert. Students clung to fences, eyes wide, hearts racing, and even some of the pro heroes observing from afar couldn't hide their fascination. You're strong, Bakugo panted, chest heaving. Stronger than I thought. But I'm not done. Shadow's eyes softened fractionally, the first sign of emotion in his stoic expression. Impressive. You carry your pride like armor, and yet it makes you predictable. He paused, teleporting behind Bakugo and tapping his shoulder. Not to strike, not yet, just to observe. I see why you fight. You have something to protect, something to prove. It's human. Bakugo spun around, enraged, but the words sank in like an unspoken challenge. He roared, exploding the ground beneath him, launching forward in a flurry of attacks designed to overwhelm any opponent. And yet, Shadow met each strike, parried with precision, never exploiting Bakugo's overextensions, never holding back entirely, but never ending the fight. The arena became a blur of explosions, teleportation after images, and a cacophony of energy. Each clash left scorched craters and smoke curling into the sky, a testament to Bakugo's raw power and Shadow's unearthly agility. And then, just as Bakugo prepared his final, massive detonation, one that could level the arena, Shadow stepped back, calm, composed, and for the first time, spoke with an almost approving tone. Not bad. Not bad at all, Katsuki Bakugo. Bakugo's chest heaved. Sweat and grit mixed with the dust and smoke of battle. His eyes burned with the unrelenting fire of pride and anger. He wasn't beaten. Not yet. Shadow's quiet confidence stood in stark contrast to Bakugo's explosive fury. The tension between them hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. And as the students and heroes around them watched in awe, one thought echoed in their minds. This was not just a fight. This was the beginning of a rivalry that could change everything. Because in Shadow, Bakugo had met not only a mirror of strength, but a challenge that demanded more than just power. It demanded heart, strategy, and resolve. And somewhere deep in Shadow's mind, a flicker of curiosity sparked. How far could this human push himself? The arena fell silent for a heartbeat. Then, with a sudden crackle of explosive energy, Bakugo lunged again. Shadow's quills shimmered. Chaos energy thrummed. The clash was far from over. And in the eyes of every witness, one truth became undeniable. This battle would be remembered for years to come. The soft hum of the UA High laboratory was punctuated by the scratching of Izuku Midoriya's pen against his notebook, rapid and precise. His green eyes were wide, darting between readings on his portable scanner and the strange aura surrounding Shadow. Even in confinement, Shadow radiated a presence that refused to be measured by conventional hero metrics. His energy, Midoriya whispered to himself, leaning closer. The screen flickered with chaotic readings, data spiking erratically. It reacts to emotions? Shadow sat silently across from him, quills slightly bristling. He had been observing these humans for days, trying to decipher their obsession with heroism, their rituals, and their strange adherence to rules. It was inefficient, illogical, yet compelling in its own way. "What are you doing?" Shadow's voice was low, curiosity laced with a subtle edge. "Why analyze me so intently?" Midoriya's gaze didn't waver. "I need to understand your abilities. Your chaos energy. It amplifies when strong emotions are nearby. Anger, fear, determination. It responds to it, grows stronger." Shadow tilted his head, crimson eyes narrowing. "So your kind fights, struggles, and suffers, and I become more powerful from it." There was a trace of confusion in his tone, an alien tone trying to grasp human motivations. Midoriya nodded. "It's not just raw strength. It's connection. Your energy. It resonates with human intent, with the emotions driving them. That's why your chaos control fluctuates unpredictably here. The world itself is influencing it." From the observation deck, Bakugo slammed his fist into his palm, exhaling smoke in frustration. "So, that's why the idiots before me couldn't keep up. His power isn't just speed or chaos. It's tied to us. Tied to feelings." Shadow's gaze turned to the young hero, studying the fiery boy's explosive energy. The idea of power influenced by others' emotions was alien, and yet fascinating. The inefficiency of human emotion fascinated him almost as much as it frustrated him. "I see now," Shadow murmured. "This heroism, it's not merely about strength. You risk your lives for others because you choose to. You all carry a weight, a purpose." Midoriya's pencil paused. "Exactly. That's why we fight. For the people who can't protect themselves." His voice trembled slightly, both with excitement and awe. Shadow had not only survived previous encounters with proheroes, but had also resisted, adapted, and now, perhaps, was beginning to understand something beyond pure combat. The atmosphere shifted as the lab's security monitors blared. Red lights flashed across the walls, and the piercing sound of alarms filled the room. Students and instructors alike turned sharply toward the source of the chaos. "Emergency! Emergency! Unauthorized infiltration detected," the automated voice repeated, its tone urgent and unrelenting. Midoriya's heart skipped. "No, it can't be." Through the massive glass windows overlooking the city, shadowy figures moved with precision. Orchestrated chaos, dark silhouettes that twisted and struck with intent. The League of Villains had arrived, and their target was unmistakable. Bakugo growled, fingers trembling on the triggers of his explosions. "Figures, they want a piece of him, don't they? Guess the underworld knows what we've been ignoring." Shadow rose slowly to his full height, the hum of chaos energy around him flickering like a storm cloud. For the first time in this world, he didn't seem amused or detached. His posture shifted subtly, eyes scanning the encroaching threat. "Why do they want me?" Shadow asked, voice steady yet tinged with curiosity. "Is it fear or ambition?" Midoriya stepped forward, urgency in his voice. "Both. They see your power as a weapon. If they control you, the balance of this world could change. They don't care what you are, only what you can do." Shadow's quills bristled, chaos energy thrumming in resonance with the city below. He didn't fully grasp the complexity of hero culture yet, nor the layers of villainy in this society. But instinctively, he understood threat, danger, and strategy. The students looked on, a mixture of awe and apprehension painting their faces. Shadow was no longer just an outsider, a subject of analysis. He was a target, a being whose existence alone could reshape the battlefield, whose abilities challenged every expectation of hero and villain alike. And as the League of Villains advanced, the city trembling beneath their arrival, Shadow's crimson eyes glimmered with an unfamiliar emotion, a spark of curiosity, perhaps even anticipation. Midoriya's voice barely carried over the alarm sirens, determined and steady. Shadow, whatever happens next, we'll face it together. The energy in the lab seemed to pulse, responding to the collective fear, determination, and hope of every student present. Chaos energy shimmered like liquid light, resonating in harmony with human emotion. Outside, the villains pressed forward, dark shapes cutting across the city skyline, unstoppable and relentless. And in that moment, Shadow realized something vital. In this world, power wasn't just strength, it was connection. It was intent. It was human. The alarms screamed louder. The League was closing in. Shadow's eyes narrowed, chaos energy coiling around him like a storm about to break. And then, as if time itself held its breath, Shadow spoke, voice low, firm, and unyielding. Show me what your world is willing to risk. The camera of fate pulled back to capture the city, the heroes, and the approaching storm. The League of Villains had chosen their target. Shadow was ready. And the next chapter of this collision between worlds was about to erupt in fire, chaos, and unrelenting power. The stage was set. The players were moving. And everyone, heroes, villains, and the ultimate life form, felt the first tremors of a confrontation that could shake the world itself. The alarmed city below seemed to pulse in warning. This was only the beginning. The skies above UA High darkened with unnatural clouds, swirling as if the air itself had grown heavy with malice. Within minutes, the once quiet campus erupted into chaos. Alarm sirens blared, echoing through the hallways and outdoor training grounds, and the distant sound of shattering glass signaled the arrival of something far worse than any practice drill. From the shadows of the city's perimeter, the League of Villains descended, their silhouettes cutting across the skyline like living knives. Twilight streaks of smoke and the metallic scent of decay preceded their arrival, each figure moving with lethal purpose. At the center of the storm was a singular goal: Shadow. Inside the main training arena, Midoriya and the UA students had barely finished strategizing when the first explosion shook the ground. Bakugo's eyes narrowed, his hands sparking violently. "They're here! All of them!" he shouted, charging forward with a roar that rivaled the thunder overhead. Shadow rose from the shadows of the observation deck, crimson eyes gleaming. He didn't hesitate, calculating each movement before striking. With a burst of chaos control, he teleported across the battlefield, intercepting a group of villains attempting to breach the inner gates. His movements were fluid, almost artistic, yet deadly. Every strike precise, disarming without unnecessary destruction. "Stay behind me," Midoriya yelled, rallying the students. Todoroki unleashed his twin element flames, ice spreading across the ground to slow the villains' advance, while Bakugo's explosions tore chunks from the battlefield. Shadow moved among them like a shadow of light and motion, coordinating instinctively despite never having fought alongside these humans before. But the battle quickly turned. A distorted laugh echoed across the chaos, chilling in its clarity. Tamura Shigaraki stepped forward, the very ground at his feet beginning to crumble and rot at his touch. Buildings trembled as he advanced, decay spreading like ink across paper, threatening to swallow everything in its path. Shadow's eyes narrowed, feeling the foreign corruption seep toward him. Every instinct screamed to retreat, to disengage. But something in the way the students fought, in the sheer resolve of these humans, sparked a strange resonance within his chaos energy. He clenched his fists. So, this is heroism in motion, he muttered under his breath. Shigaraki's grin widened, a grotesque reflection of pure malice. You're not like the others. You can resist, but even you will bend, he hissed, one hand dragging across the ground, turning concrete and steel into dust and rot. The battlefield itself obeyed his malevolent will. Midoriya leapt beside Shadow, determination burning bright. We can't let him take you. We fight together. His voice carried weight beyond his age, a call to arms, a beacon to all who still believed in the impossible. Shadow glanced at him, surprised. There was no fear in this human's eyes, only courage. That was unusual, valuable. The two collided into the middle of the battle, a vortex of speed and energy. Shadow teleported repeatedly, disarming villains with precision, yet each movement became more labored, his chaos energy flickering erratically. This world wasn't like his own. The flow of energy here, so biologically intertwined with emotion, drained him in ways he hadn't anticipated. Bakugo surged forward, roaring, his explosions lighting the smoke-filled air. Don't let him! Don't let anyone touch him! Shadow intercepted a swarm of villains mid-air, his quills cutting shadows through the night. He realized, even in combat, that these humans fought not just for victory, but for each other, for ideals, for something intangible yet unbreakable. Shigaraki finally closed the distance, decay advancing like a living tide. Shadow froze for a split second, the blackness creeping closer. Crimson energy flared around him, attempting to counter the rot, but the sensation was alien, almost corrosive to his power. For the first time in this world, he was challenged not just physically, but at the very essence of his being. A sudden scream from behind drew his attention. Midoriya had been pinned under debris, Todoroki struggling to keep villains at bay. Shadow's gaze sharpened. The stakes were no longer abstract. This was no longer a test or observation. This was life and death, for humans he had barely begun to understand, and for himself. With a surge of resolve, Shadow's chaos energy pulsed violently, tearing through the encroaching decay in bursts of distorted light and motion. The battlefield seemed to warp around him, the tension so thick it was almost tangible. Shigaraki's grin faltered ever so slightly, sensing the resistance of a power that even he could not consume. And then, in a moment frozen in time, Shigaraki's hand touched the ground again, the decaying wave advancing like a living nightmare, reaching for Shadow, the ultimate life form whose very existence defied the laws of Quirks. Shadow's crimson eyes met Shigaraki's, unyielding, calculating, alive. If you want me, he whispered, voice carrying across the battlefield, you'll have to do more than touch the ground. Above the chaos, the city held its breath. Explosions lit the sky. Ice and fire battled shadows and rot. The UA students rallied, each heartbeat a drum of courage against overwhelming darkness. And yet, looming ahead, Shigaraki's decay continued to spread, unstoppable, inexorable. The first confrontation between Shadow and the League of Villains had begun, and the question hung heavy in the smoke-filled air. Could even Shadow, the ultimate life form, withstand the corruption of a world designed to challenge him? The alarms blared, the ground trembled, and the battlefield seemed to tilt toward inevitability. A single thought echoed in every mind witnessing this chaos. This was no ordinary fight. The war for Shadow had begun. And at that precise instant, crimson chaos energy flared. A storm of light and motion about to clash with the unstoppable decay of the ultimate villain. The scene froze on the brink of catastrophe. A single truth undeniable. Shadow's arrival had changed everything. The next move would decide not just his fate, but the fate of every hero, every student, and the fragile balance of this world itself. Smoke and dust lingered over the battlefield like a veil, half hiding the chaos that had erupted across UA High. Students and heroes scrambled amidst the debris, their breaths sharp and heavy, hearts pounding. And at the center of it all, where the air seemed to crackle with raw, unnatural energy, stood two figures, locked not just in combat, but in a war of ideas. Shadow and Shigaraki faced each other, silhouettes sharp against the flickering lights of ruined buildings. Shadow's crimson eyes glowed softly, reflecting not fear, but calculation. Across from him, Shigaraki's decaying touch had already begun to creep over the broken concrete, turning even the tiniest shard into rot. Yet in the middle of this destruction, words became as lethal as any punch. "You don't understand," Shigaraki spat, his voice cutting through the din of explosions and alarms. "This world, it's rotten. The heroes, the society they protect, it's all a lie. They pretend to save, but they control. They suppress. Weakness is rewarded while truth is punished. I will burn it down. All of it." Shadow tilted his head, quills bristling in response to the raw conviction. "Weakness is not to be coddled," he replied, voice low and even. "It must be eliminated. Survival is not mercy, it is strength. Only those who endure deserve to exist." The similarity in their words hung like a thundercloud over the battlefield. Heroes watching from the debris froze mid-action. Midoriya's eyes widened, scribbling frantic notes in his mind. He isn't agreeing with Shigaraki because he's evil. He just sees the world differently, he muttered, a bead of sweat sliding down his temple. Bakugo's fist trembled with barely contained fury. "Don't tell me you're going to stand there and debate philosophy while the guy who wants to wipe us all out is right in front of you." Shadow's gaze shifted briefly to Bakugo, unreadable, before returning to Shigaraki. "You desire destruction," he said softly. "Your goal is chaos, but your understanding is flawed. You destroy without purpose. I eliminate only what cannot adapt." Shigaraki laughed, the sound ragged and dripping with malice. "Purpose. Adaptation. You think the world cares about purpose? The world is a cage built by lies, and heroes are the wardens. With your power, you could help me break it all. Think about it. Together, we could tear this system apart. Free it from its shackles." The words struck like a blade. Shadow's crimson aura pulsed, the air around him bending subtly, as if sensing the weight of Shigaraki's offer. The students shifted nervously, the tension palpable. Could he agree? Could the ultimate life form, whose power dwarfed Quirks and whose presence defied understanding, truly side with the League of Villains? Midoriya's voice broke through the silence, trembling but firm. "Shadow! Don't listen to him. Heroes fight not because the world is perfect, but because we can make it better." Shadow's gaze flicked to Midoriya, absorbing the passion, the unyielding conviction of someone willing to risk everything for strangers, for ideals he barely comprehended. and yet the words were foreign. Weak, perhaps, but potent. Shadow's mind, used to precision and outcomes, struggled to calculate morality in the chaos of emotion. Shigaraki's grin widened, sensing hesitation, reading the subtle shift in Shadow's aura. You see, even the ultimate life form can be swayed. Power without direction is wasted. Join me. Help me destroy hero society. Together, we can remake this world into something pure. The battlefield seemed to hold its breath. Smoke curled upward like the fingers of a hand trying to grasp the sky. Shadow's form tensed, quills standing rigid as he measured the decay of Shigaraki's ideology against the chaotic resolve of the heroes around him. Every fiber of his being screamed for efficiency, for the elimination of weakness. But every instinct, now tinged with curiosity, began to recognize the value of these humans' convictions. Bakugo growled, fists sparking. "Say something, you idiot. Don't just stand there like a statue." Shadow finally spoke, voice calm, almost chilling in its composure. "I am not here to destroy, but I am not here to save either. I exist to observe, to test, and to strike only when necessary." Shigaraki froze for a split second, his grin faltering under the weight of unexpected defiance. "So, you refuse?" His voice was quieter now, almost curious. Shadow stepped forward, the red glow of chaos energy flickering in controlled bursts. "I refuse to be a tool for ideology. Weakness, strength. These are constants I judge myself. I will decide when and where action is required." The students exhaled collectively, relief washing through the tension, though it was fragile, like smoke on the wind. Yet the battlefield remained a tinderbox. The League of Villains still loomed, the city still trembled, and Shadow's presence, so alien, so unbound by the rules of this world, was now a question mark that even heroes could not answer. Shigaraki's eyes narrowed, the decaying fingers of his quirk twitching as he contemplated the ultimate challenge. Then we must break him, force his hand, test the limits of what even he is willing to destroy. The air thickened with anticipation. Shadow's red aura flared brighter, quills slicing the smoke like blades of fire, eyes fixed on Shigaraki. Around them, heroes and students prepared, adrenaline surging through every vein, as if the world itself sensed the collision of ideals about to erupt. And above the ruin of UA, the words of Shigaraki lingered like a poisonous echo. "Help me destroy hero society." The ultimate life form paused. The world waited. And in that instant, the very foundation of heroism trembled under the weight of choice. The next move would define not just the fate of this battle, but the philosophy of an entire world. The council room at UA's high was tense, the air thick with the weight of opinions, fear, and ambition. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, illuminating the polished floors, but even the brightness couldn't pierce the shadow that lingered over every conversation. At the center of the debate, Shadow, the ultimate life form, whose presence had fractured hero society into factions that argued not just over power, but morality itself. Using him as a weapon could change everything, said one pro-hero administrator, voice steady but edged with urgency. His abilities surpass Quirks. If trained properly, if guided, we could end threats before they even begin. Across the table, another shook their head, eyes narrowing. And what happens when he decides we're the threat? When someone like him judges humans, decides who survives or who falls? We can't contain that kind of power. Imprisonment is the only safe option. The debate spiraled, each argument cutting sharper than the last. Midoriya leaned forward, hands gripping the edge of the table. His eyes glimmered with hope and curiosity. No, Shadow isn't just a weapon. He's something different, something this world hasn't seen. He could become a hero, not because he wants to, but because he understands consequences. We can guide him, teach him what heroism really means. Bakugo slammed his fist onto the table, startling everyone into silence. Are you insane, Deku? You just saw him fight. You think anyone can control that power. He's not a hero. He's a storm, and storms destroy everything in their path. The room erupted into murmurs, some nodding in agreement, others shaking their heads at Bakugo's bluntness. Even seasoned teachers and pro-heroes couldn't reconcile the truth. Shadow was both a threat and a possibility, a living paradox who could tip the balance of this world. Unnoticed in the shadows of the hallway, Shadow stood silently, listening. His crimson eyes reflected the flickering holographic reports, the fiery gestures of Midoriya, and the unyielding scowl of Bakugo. Words, so many human words about morality, power, fear, and hope washed over him. He had no obligation here, no mission. Yet each voice carved a mark on his perception, a subtle imprint of a world so different from his own. They think they can categorize me, Shadow whispered under his breath, voice a low hum that barely disturbed the air. Weapon, hero, prisoner. Fools. Their choices are meaningless to me. Midoriya leaned back, sensing the presence just beyond the doorway. But too late. Shadow had already moved. He slipped from the council room, almost invisible, a shadow among shadows, silent as the falling dusk outside. Bakugo noticed the empty space where Shadow had stood. What the hell? He's gone. His voice was sharp, a mix of shock and irritation, and it echoed down the empty hallways. Teachers rushed to the windows, scanning the grounds. Surveillance footage flickered, but Shadow had vanished before any systems could lock onto him. Midoriya's heart sank. He left? But we were just beginning to reach him. His voice trailed into silence, the weight of responsibility pressing against his chest. Every fiber of him wanted to chase, to find the ultimate life form before someone, or something, used him for destruction. The council room remained divided. Some officials demanded immediate action, deploying squads to track and capture Shadow before his presence escalated into catastrophe. Others argued for patience, convinced that chasing him would only provoke the being they barely understood. The ideological rift widened like a chasm, mirroring the very uncertainty Shadow had created in their hearts. Outside, Shadow moved with precision and grace, chaos energy flickering faintly around him, blending into the twilight. His thoughts were his own, free from debate, free from morality. And yet, as he glanced back toward UA, he acknowledged, almost imperceptibly, the strange, unquantifiable curiosity these humans had stirred within him. He didn't owe them allegiance. He didn't seek their understanding. But their convictions, their fragile courage, it intrigued him. The city below hummed with life, oblivious to the decision that had just taken place. Heroes and villains alike would soon feel the ripple of this choice. Shadow's departure wasn't an escape, it was a statement, a promise, a question without answer. Back in the council room, Midoriya clenched his fists, jaw tight. We can't give up on him, he said quietly, almost to himself. Not yet. He's more than what they fear, more than what they claim to understand. Bakugo snorted, muttering under his breath. We'd better be ready for whatever storm comes next. Shadow disappeared into the horizon, a solitary figure weaving through the cityscape, unseen but not unnoticed. And in the silence he left behind, the debate raged on, a society divided over the question that now burned hotter than ever. What do you do when the ultimate life form walks among you, and no one can control him? The sun dipped below the skyline, casting long shadows over UA, and somewhere in that growing darkness, Shadow's path began. Not toward heroes or villains, but toward his own unknown destiny. The world waited, and it would never be the same. The wind howled across the deserted rooftop, carrying with it the distant hum of the city below. Shadows stretched long in the fading light, and in the quiet between the gusts, Midoriya could feel the weight of something unspoken pressing against him. Shadow stood at the edge, silhouette sharp and unmoving, crimson eyes reflecting the dying sun. The battlefield of ideologies, debates, and battles had faded, leaving only the silence between them. You came for answers. Shadow's voice was low, barely above the wind. And I suppose I will give them, but understand, some truths are heavier than a hero can carry. Midoriya took a cautious step forward, heart racing. His notebook was clutched tightly, a habit he could not abandon. I don't just want to understand your power, he said. I want to understand you, who you really are, why you fight, why you even exist. Shadow's gaze fell to the horizon, hands clenching at his sides. The chaos energy around him flickered faintly, reacting to the tension, the unspoken grief. I was created in war, he began, voice almost a whisper. Not born, created. Forged to be the ultimate life form. A weapon designed to end conflicts before they could begin. They gave me strength, but took everything else. My world, destroyed before I could even comprehend it. Midoriya's breath caught. Your world? Shadow's eyes shifted to him, a fleeting trace of something Midoriya had never expected. Pain. Yes, a civilization of hope, of heroes who swore to protect. And yet, when the enemy arrived, when destruction came, they did nothing. I survived because I was stronger. I survived because I was built to. But survivors, they carry a burden heavier than death itself. The wind gusted again, tossing Midoriya's hair and echoing the turmoil of the words. You're not emotionless, he said softly, almost to himself. You've felt loss. You've seen grief firsthand. Shadow's gaze lingered on the boy, measuring, testing. Centuries of war, of conflict, of watching the weak fall and the world crumble. They do not teach compassion. They teach calculation, precision, survival. I was never meant to be a hero. I was never meant to understand friendship or loyalty. But I have observed. I have seen what humans call courage, what they call sacrifice. Midoriya's hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the realization that the being before him, the ultimate life form, was not some cold, calculating weapon. He was a survivor, carrying the echoes of a destroyed world, a witness to pain and loss that no hero could have imagined. And yet, Shadow continued, voice dropping lower, almost a hiss, heroes didn't save my world. Not one. They clung to their ideals, to their hope, while everything burned. I have no illusions left. No faith in heroism as you know it. Midoriya swallowed, processing the words. But even so, you're here. You didn't vanish into nothingness. Didn't give in to destruction. Why? Why come to our world? Shadow's eyes glinted faintly, chaos energy sparking around him like embers in a dying fire. Perhaps curiosity. Perhaps because even in a world of fragile quirks, there is something different, something worth observing. I do not seek to protect it, nor to destroy it. Yet. The words hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. Midoriya felt a mix of fear, awe, and understanding. Shadow was not a villain, not entirely. He was a being shaped by loss, forged in the crucible of despair, and now walking in a world that measured courage differently. You carry centuries of grief, Midoriya whispered, but you're not alone here. We, heroes, He paused, realizing how small his voice sounded against the weight of Shadow's existence. We can help you find purpose beyond destruction. Shadow turned away, gaze drifting toward the darkening cityscape. Purpose. Heroes speak of it like it's a shield. But perhaps, purpose is not given. It is taken, carved, earned. A faint, almost imperceptible sigh left him. A human sound in a form Midoriya thought couldn't feel. The first stars began to pierce the twilight, casting faint light over the rooftop. Shadow's chaos energy pulsed with the rhythm of his suppressed emotion, a storm of grief and power that the world could never fully contain. And now, Shadow murmured, almost to himself, I will watch. I will learn. I will decide if there is a place here for someone like me. Midoriya stepped closer, hesitant but determined. Then let me see it with you. Your world. Your fight. It doesn't have to be yours alone. For a moment, silence fell. Then, a spark of acknowledgement flickered in Shadow's crimson eyes, brief and fleeting. He was not welcoming friendship, not yet. But he was listening. He was noticing. The wind howled once more, carrying the unspoken promise of trials ahead. Shadow's past was not yet forgotten. His purpose was not yet defined. And somewhere between grief, power, and human ideals, a choice waited, one that could change both their worlds forever. And as the night fully descended, Midoriya knew one thing with certainty. Shadow's story was far from over, and the truth of the ultimate life form was only just beginning to unfold. Deep within the labyrinthine underground of Musutafu, the air hummed with unnatural energy. Pipes groaned under the strain of hidden machinery, and shadows flickered against cold steel walls. Here, in a place long abandoned by sunlight and morality, all for one moved with a precision that could unsettle even the most seasoned villains. Every step, every gesture, hinted at a mind years ahead of everyone else, an intellect that thrived on chaos. He paused before a massive chamber, the heart of his secret project. Stolen quirks pulsed in suspended animation, each contained in crystalline vessels, faintly glowing like captured stars. Surrounding them, towering machinery twisted and wound like serpents coiled around a throne. This was no ordinary lab. This was the birthplace of a nightmare. All for one's eyes glinted, reflecting the countless stolen powers he had accumulated over decades. Chaos energy, he murmured, voice low and reverent. A force beyond quirks, untamable, unbound, yet replicable, if I can harness it. He let the thought linger, letting the possibilities stretch across the world like a shadow over Musutafu. I will not merely control heroes and villains. I will rewrite reality itself. He stepped forward, palms brushing over a control console, etched with esoteric symbols. Lines of light traced the veins of the machine, connecting the Quirk reactors to a central chamber, a vessel designed to synthesize the unpredictable, raw energy of chaos itself. The first reactor's core thrummed, humming like a heartbeat that didn't belong to any human. Begin sequence. His command was soft, almost intimate, but it carried the weight of inevitability. The machinery obeyed, gears spinning, pistons pumping, and the air around the reactor shimmered with a distorted heat. A faint distortion curled through the chamber, like ripples across water, but denser, more dangerous. The stolen Quirks twitched in their vessels as if sensing the birth of something they could not comprehend. Outside, the city slept, unaware that the laws of reality were beginning to bend beneath All for One's hands. Energy leaked, subtle at first, warping the very light in the room. Shadows bent unnaturally. Colors shifted. Even the sound of the humming machinery carried with it a dissonance that gnawed at the senses. "This is only the beginning," All for One whispered, eyes narrowing as the reactor's glow intensified. "Once the artificial chaos flows, no Quirk will remain safe, no hero will remain untested, and no villain will be beyond my reach." A subtle shiver ran through the air. Sensors detected anomalies, but the reactor ignored them. It was designed to defy containment, to turn raw potential into a controlled storm. The first tendrils of chaos energy leapt from the reactor, not with aggression, but with awareness. The energy itself seemed to probe, assessing, learning, adapting. All for One's lips curved into a smile, calm, deliberate, and terrifying. "Perfect," he said. "Soon I will have not just power, but a key to evolution itself." He raised a hand, watching as the energy rippled outward, distorting the space around him. A bolt arced across the chamber, sparking against the ceiling, and the room trembled, as if reality itself recognized the audacity of his ambition. Elsewhere, shadows moved in the city. Heroes began to stir, not from alarms, not from villain sightings, but from a subtle shift in the world itself. Midoriya, Shadow, Bakugo, all felt it, an unease crawling under their skin, whispering of danger, yet unseen. Something was coming. Something bigger than any villain they had faced. Something that could twist the very essence of Quirks. The reactor pulsed again, brighter this time, the energy spilling over the chamber like liquid fire. Steel warped, alarms buried in the structure's depths began to groan, and the very air seemed to vibrate with possibility and peril. All for One stepped back, letting the first synthesized tendrils of chaos energy writhe and coil freely. He watched, patient, calculating. He did not need to fight, not yet. Reality was becoming his ally, and in that instant, a single thought crossed his mind, sharp and deliberate. "Once I perfect this, the world will kneel, not out of fear of me, but out of inevitability." A pulse of energy surged outward, warping the walls of the lab and sending faint shockwaves through the city above. Streetlights flickered, windows cracked. Even the winds seemed to twist unnaturally. The first reactor had activated, and reality was already bending. All for One's voice cut through the hum, cold and certain. "Let them come. Let heroes rise. Let villains scheme. None of it matters. This is the dawn of a new order." Outside the chamber, the night deepened. Somewhere in the shadows, a figure watched from afar, unacknowledged by the city, but aware of the disturbance. Chaos energy had been unleashed, not by accident, not by failure, but by design. And as the first ripple of this new reality spread, it whispered a singular, terrifying truth to the world. Nothing would ever be the same. The reactor's glow intensified, walls bent, reality pulsed, and somewhere in the heart of Musutafu, All for One smiled. Now, let the world feel my vision. The city slept uneasily, unaware of the storm gathering in its heart. Somewhere high above the skyline, in a penthouse of gleaming steel and glass, a figure stood alone. His eyes, sharp and calculating, followed streams of data cascading across multiple screens. Every movement, every anomaly, every surge of energy from All for One's reactors was cataloged, measured, and exploited. He was a hero, or at least the world thought he was. But tonight, the mask would slip. In the silence, he muttered under his breath, a whisper meant only for himself. Power. Chaos beyond Quirks. It's within reach. If I can harness it, I can shape this world. Not just defend it, but command it. The words tasted of ambition, but also of desperation, a hunger that overrode all morality. In the shadows, All for One's hand stretched outward, invisible, guiding, pulling at the threads of desire. Meanwhile, far below in the city streets, Shadow moved with quiet observation. His instincts, honed through centuries of war, sensed the shift before the chaos became visible. Something had changed in the human world, a darkness that wasn't born from villains, nor from the decay of society, but from those who were supposed to protect it. And for the first time, he felt a weight pressing against his perception. Humans could be as dangerous as the enemies he had once fought. Back in the penthouse, the hero stepped closer to a shimmering console, its interface alive with the swirling tendrils of artificial chaos energy. With a decisive motion, he activated the final synchronization. Sparks licked the walls, machines whined under the surge, reality itself seemed to flinch. And then, without warning, the energy spiraled outward, untamed, violent, unpredictable. Impossible, came the first whispered panic from his communication device. He ignored it. His eyes burned with resolve. With this, I can do what heroes could never do. I can transcend limits. But the moment of triumph did not last. Shadow, drawn by the pulse of distorted energy, arrived atop the nearest skyscraper. The wind whipped around him, tugging at his cloak, tossing shadows into motion like living predators. He studied the chaos below, the unnatural writhing of energy tearing at the city's very fabric. And then he saw the figure at the heart of it all, a hero, betraying the very ideals he claimed to uphold. Humans, Shadow whispered, voice low and bitter. Even those you call protectors can be as ruthless as the ones you fight. The energy surged higher, tendrils shooting skyward, carving glowing fissures through the clouds. The dimensional rift opened slowly at first, a thin slit between worlds, a tear in the very fabric of reality, but it grew with terrifying speed. Cars swerved in the streets, buildings trembled, the alarms of UA blared, but even the trained ears of its students could barely register the unnatural hum that had begun to resonate in every corner of the city. From his vantage point, Midoriya clenched his fists. He had felt the energy before, during Shadow's battle with Shigaraki, during All for One's experiments. But this was different. Wild, unrestrained, and fueled by ambition that no morality could restrain. Bakugo's eyes flared with fury. That's a hero, he yelled, his voice lost to the wind. He's supposed to protect people, not destroy everything to feed his own ego. Shadow leapt from the rooftop, descending into the chaos with inhuman speed. Each step he took sent ripples through the distorted energy, stabilizing small pockets of reality around him, but the rift was growing faster than he could contain. Sparks of chaos energy struck the ground, exploding with the force of miniature detonations, and the very air smelled of ozone and burnt metal. The betrayer hero laughed, voice ringing with a cold triumph. You see, even heroes must evolve, or they will fall. I'm offering the world a chance to surpass itself. His hands glowed as he attempted to channel the spiraling chaos energy, feeding it, bending it to his will. But it resisted, writhing like a living thing, responding not to intent, but to desire itself. Shadow's eyes narrowed. He understood now. Power without discipline, without purpose, was volatile. It could not be tamed, even by the so-called protectors. You seek to command forces you do not understand, Shadow said, his voice carrying over the roar of energy. And you will bring ruin, not salvation. Suddenly, the rift pulsed violently, a flash of white-hot light shooting skyward. Buildings shuddered. The streets cracked. Civilians fled in all directions, screaming, their reflections distorted in the glass towers that threatened to collapse. Midoriya's heart pounded. He knew that if Shadow didn't act, the consequences would be unimaginable. Shadow's eyes glowed faintly, chaos energy coiling around him like living shadows. He leapt forward, cutting a path through the uncontrolled power, stabilizing fragments of reality with precise, controlled movements. The betrayer hero's expression faltered as the energy recoiled, resisting his command. You think humans are weak? Shadow said, landing in front of him, calm and measured. Perhaps, but unchecked ambition, that is far more dangerous than any villain you've ever faced. And then, as the dimensional rift stretched open, a force unlike anything the city had seen surged from it. An unknown, menacing energy, promising devastation and secrets beyond comprehension. The betrayer hero stumbled back, panic finally replacing arrogance. Shadow's form glowed in the chaos, a solitary figure between salvation and catastrophe. The city trembled beneath them. Heroes above, civilians below, the betrayer at the heart of it all. And Shadow realized with a bitter clarity that this world, its heroes, its society, was capable of the same destruction he had once fought against. The dimensional rift pulsed again, wider, hungrier, and in that moment, the audience of the world, the viewers of fate itself, were left with a singular, terrifying thought. The true battle had just begun, and it would not be fought only between heroes and villains. The sky above the city was no longer a sky. It had become a canvas of chaos. Rivers of light twisted into impossible shapes. Clouds folding over themselves like sheets of shattered glass, and lightning that didn't obey physics, striking sideways and ricocheting through buildings. Streets bent unnaturally, glass towers warped like liquid, and the air itself vibrated with a hum that set teeth on edge. The rift had grown, a gaping wound in reality, and the world teetered on the brink of unraveling. From the highest rooftops, Shadow surveyed the devastation. His eyes, normally cool and calculating, reflected a storm of lights that no hero had ever seen before. He had arrived in this world as a weapon, a solitary force with the capacity for destruction. But the chaos spilling from the dimensional rift was different. This wasn't a battle, or even a confrontation. It was an annihilation in slow motion, a reality slowly tearing apart at its seams, and his presence was tied to its growth. Everything, Shadow murmured, voice low, almost lost amidst the roar of the tearing city. Everything is reacting to me. Below, heroes and villains alike scrambled through streets that bent and cracked beneath their feet. The League of Villains, led by a disoriented Shigaraki, were forced to cooperate with the heroes, simply to survive. Deku shouted commands, Bakugo barked orders, and even Todoroki combined fire and ice to stabilize collapsing structures. A temporary alliance had formed, not out of trust, but out of necessity. Doria's gaze met Shadow's across the chaotic cityscape. He had followed him instinctively, as if drawn to the source of the power that had terrified the world. Shadow, he called out, voice barely audible above the roar. This is your chaos energy. You can control it, right? You have to. There's no other way to stop this. Shadow's shadowed form twisted as he leapt from rooftop to rooftop, chaos energy coiling around him like serpents, glowing faintly against the distorted light of the city. Yes, he said, voice heavy with resolve, but controlling it comes at a cost. His eyes glowed red, reflecting the growing rift. Massive chaos control. Enough to close this. But it could kill me. Bakugo roared, charging forward to meet a collapsing building mid-fall, eyes fixed on Shadow. We don't have time for hesitation, he shouted. You want to save everyone? Then don't talk about dying. Just do it. Shadow landed on a crumbling plaza, energy radiating outward, responding instinctively to the world's fear, anger, and desperation. The distortions reacted to him, bending back toward balance in small pockets around his body. Every movement was precise, measured, a master attempting to calm a storm he had not fully created. The dimensional rift pulsed violently above, sending waves of energy cascading across the city. Reality flickered. Cars froze mid-motion. Pedestrians appeared in two places at once, and gravity warped sporadically. Heroes and villains alike felt their own quirks faltering, their bodies resisting the unnatural physics. Only Shadow's presence, his chaos energy resonating with the rift, could stabilize the growing destruction. Midoriya, struggling to keep pace, observed the energy flowing from Shadow. Each pulse of chaos energy seemed tied to emotion, fear, desperation, hope. And it was as if the city itself had become an organism responding to Shadow's presence. He realized with growing urgency that Shadow wasn't just fighting the rift. He was fighting for the world, channeling an unimaginable force while holding back the destructive potential of his own being. Todoroki, frozen in midair, glancing between his classmates and Shadow, shouted, He's stabilizing it, but he's pushing himself too hard. The fire in his hand flared uncontrollably, ice slipping through his fingers as gravity shifted under the energy strain. Shadow's form glowed brighter, chaos energy spiraling around him in a halo of dark light, and he exhaled sharply. The rift's edges quivered, reality warping and snapping like threads in a storm. Every heartbeat sent shockwaves across the city. Every motion of his hand corrected the distortions, threading fragments of collapsed space into coherence. And then, from the depths of the dimensional tear, an echoing vibration thrummed, a sound that seemed alive, intelligent. The rift itself responded, pulling, probing, hungering. Shadow's expression hardened. The catastrophe wasn't just a consequence of All for One's ambition. It was intrinsically linked to his own arrival, his own energy seeping into this world. The stakes could not be clearer. One massive, final use of chaos control could close the rift entirely. But the cost might be his life. His energy burned brighter, coiling like a living entity around his body, the city trembling beneath the power. Civilians fled, heroes braced, villains flinched, and Midoriya's eyes widened in awe and fear. Shadow took a deep breath. If this world is to survive, I will take the storm upon myself. With a final, decisive motion, chaos energy erupted from him, extending outward in massive arcs, colliding with the rift, illuminating the night with blinding light. Buildings shook violently, the wind screamed like tortured metal, and the very city seemed to hold its breath. The stakes had never been higher. And as the energy surged, Shadow's silhouette stood at the center of the chaos, a lone figure against the breaking world, preparing to do what no hero, no villain, could. The world waited, and then the unimaginable began. The heart of the reactor core glowed like a dying sun, the metal walls trembling with the power of stolen quirks fused with chaos energy. Shadows danced across the room, stretching unnaturally as the energy pulsed and throbbed like a living organism. All for One stood at the center, his body contorting, quirks intertwining with chaos-enhanced energy, forming grotesque extensions of himself. Each movement he made resonated with the hum of the reactor, a symphony of impending destruction. From the entrance, Shadow stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. The world had been reduced to a battlefield of extremes. And now, here, at the source of the threat, the final confrontation would unfold. His chaos energy crackled and spiraled around him, responding instinctively to the reactor's wild pulse. He wasn't just entering battle, he was entering the eye of a storm that could tear reality apart. All for One, Shadow's voice cut through the charged air, calm yet commanding. This ends now. The villain turned, a twisted smile splitting his face. Ah, the ultimate life form. I've been expecting you. You have no idea how deliciously your energy tastes. With this power, I will remake the world in my image, and you, Shadow, will either stand with me or be crushed beneath it. Shadow's expression didn't falter. I fight to protect what remains of this world. I don't destroy for pleasure. You will not win. The first clash came without warning. Shadow lunged, chaos energy surging into fists that collided with All for One's grotesque limbs. Sparks of stolen quirk energy flew, metal screeched under pressure, and the reactor itself shuddered violently. The impact sent a shockwave that threw both combatants across the room. Yet, even as Shadow regained his footing, he sensed the evolution within All for One. The stolen quirks were adapting, amplifying his attacks unpredictably, each strike more dangerous than the last. Midoriya, observing through a viewport, felt his heart clench. He's going beyond what anyone could imagine, he muttered, eyes wide as explosions of energy rippled from the core. Bakugo's fists clenched. No one else is stepping in. Shadow has to handle this himself. The battle escalated. Shadow dodged energy beams that sliced through the floor like molten blades, countering with spirals of chaos energy that warped the very air around him. Each strike he delivered left a shockwave, shattering walls and igniting pools of unstable quirk energy. And yet, All for One adapted with terrifying speed, retaliating with attacks that mirrored Shadow's own energy, mocking his precision with chaotic improvisation. Then, in the midst of the chaos, Shadow felt something stir within himself, a resonance with the rift, the reactor, the countless lives at stake. The energy he had contained for so long surged dark yet pure, responding to the world's fear, hope, and desperation simultaneously. His aura flared brighter, the shadows around him stretching and spinning like living extensions of his power. Chaos. Overdrive, he whispered, feeling the transformation coil through his body. The effect was instantaneous. Shadows spiraled outward, coalescing into limbs, wings, and tendrils of pure energy. His speed increased, reflexes sharpened, and every attack now carried the weight of unrestrained chaos energy. The very air bent around him, forming arcs of distortion that tore at the reactor and the floor beneath them. All for One's eyes widened, both in fascination and fear. So, you finally awaken your true potential. But it won't be enough, he screamed, launching a devastating torrent of chaos-enhanced quirks. Shadow countered, his form moving impossibly fast, every strike precise yet fluid, each motion a perfect blend of instinct and calculated chaos. The reactor's walls buckled under the force, energy arcs colliding mid-air with blinding intensity. Sparks flew like meteor showers, lighting the room in bursts of red, blue, and black. The shadows themselves seemed alive, attacking independently, striking with speed and precision that defied human comprehension. Midoriya's voice cracked as he shouted, "Shadow! He's never fought like this before. He's not holding back anymore." Even from a distance, the battle was terrifying. Destruction magnified by chaos energy, reverberating through every corner of the city. Heroes and villains alike could only watch, powerless, as the ultimate life form and the world's most dangerous villain tore through the reactor with the force of gods clashing. Shadow's eyes glowed crimson as he prepared for his next move. The power of chaos overdrive surged through him, merging instinct, fury, and purpose into a single lethal vector. Every strike he delivered now carried the weight of reality itself, every shadow bending to his will. And as All for One staggered under the overwhelming assault, it became clear the ultimate battle had begun, one that would decide not only the fate of the world, but the destiny of the chaos energy itself. From the observation deck, Midoriya whispered, almost breathless, This is the fight that will be remembered forever." Shadow's hand shot forward, tendrils of energy lashing outward, and the reactor core trembled violently. The next strike, he knew, could change everything. And in that instant, the world held its breath. The world shivered on the edge of annihilation. The dimensional rift, a gaping wound in reality, throbbed with chaotic energy, tearing at the very fabric of the cities around it. Buildings twisted unnaturally, rivers of energy laced the sky, and the screams of distant sirens were swallowed by the thunderous roar of the unstable chaos. At the epicenter stood Shadow, his form flickering as streams of pure chaos energy streamed from him like molten shadows. Every step he took scorched the ground. Every breath rattled the air. Midoriya ran across the debris-strewn street, his heart pounding. His hands shook as he raised his voice over the chaotic symphony. "Shadow! Stop! You don't have to do this!" But Shadow's eyes, crimson and resolute, didn't waver. The energy around him twisted, bending toward the rift, forming a swirling vortex that crackled with destructive potential. "It's too late," he replied, voice calm but carrying the weight of centuries. "If I do not, everything will end. Every world, every life connected to this chaos." Midoriya stumbled to a halt, disbelief and fear colliding. "You can't. You'll die. There has to be another way." A faint smile touched Shadow's lips, one that carried sorrow, determination, and memory all at once. Maria. I kept my promise. The words echoed through Midoriya's mind like a whisper of another world, a past that no one else could understand. Shadow's form shimmered as energy poured through him, his body beginning to crack under the strain. The air itself groaned as the chaos energy consumed him, stretching his limits beyond anything seen before. Shadows stretched from his limbs, twirling around the rift like ribbons of midnight, merging, twisting, and forcing the tear to shrink under his will. The scene was surreal. Midoriya could barely comprehend it. A hero of unimaginable power, not for glory, but for sacrifice. The world around them felt unreal, buildings bending, the sky a swirl of light and shadow. And yet Shadow moved with an elegance and precision that defied the chaos. Every motion carried purpose. Every burst of energy pushed the rift back, as if the universe itself was breathing in relief with each strike. "Please, Shadow, you've done enough," Midoriya cried, desperation choking his words. "We can't lose you too." But Shadow only shook his head, the faintest flicker of warmth in his eyes. "I was never meant to be saved. I was meant to protect." His voice was almost drowned by the roar of energy, yet it carried across the broken city, reaching the ears of every witness. The dimensional rift pulsed violently, reacting to the influx of chaos energy. Shadow's body became a conduit, and with each heartbeat, with each breath, the energy took a greater toll on him. Limbs bent unnaturally, his quills bristled and sparked, and the shadows of his aura seemed to scream in silent agony. Yet he pressed on, channeling every ounce of strength, every fragment of chaos energy, into sealing the breach. Midoriya, trembling, reached out as if he could physically pull Shadow back. "You're not alone. We're here with you. You don't have to carry this alone." Shadow's gaze softened, just for a fleeting second. "I am not alone. But some promises must be kept, even if it costs me everything." The ground beneath them cracked, energy surging in waves that lifted debris into the air, spinning in chaotic spirals around Shadow. Heroes and villains alike watched from the edges, powerless to intervene, their hearts caught between awe and terror. He was both protector and harbinger, a force that could save worlds while annihilating himself in the process. And then, with a final, monumental surge of power, Shadow reached into the heart of the rift. Darkness and light collided, screams of the tearing universe echoing like thunder. His body glowed, his silhouette framed against the energy maelstrom, stretching impossibly as the rift fought back. Midoriya's voice broke, raw and desperate. "No, don't go." Shadow's lips parted just enough to speak one final truth. "For Maria." The chaos began to collapse, the rift shrinking, its violent pulses slowing, drawn into Shadow's body. The energy screamed as if resisting, but Shadow's resolve was absolute. The air shimmered, the world held its breath, and a silence unlike any other fell for a fleeting instant. And then, the shadows erupted, flaring outward in a final, blinding surge, wrapping around the rift, closing it completely. Cities trembled. The sky cracked with light, then fell into calm. Where the tear had been, there was nothing but stillness. But Shadow, he was gone. Only faint trails of chaos energy lingered in the air, dissipating slowly. The ultimate life form, the savior, the silent warrior, had vanished, leaving behind a world saved, and heroes who now understood the weight of true sacrifice. Midoriya knelt amidst the rubble, chest heaving, eyes wide and shimmering. He did it. He saved us all. And in the silence, a whisper of wind carried a single thought across the city. Some heroes are not meant to live for themselves, but but for everyone else. And some promises are worth more than life itself. The city breathed again, but it was a fragile, hesitant breath. Smoke curled from the ruins where the dimensional rift had once threatened to swallow reality. Skyscrapers leaned at impossible angles. Streets were torn apart, and the sky shimmered faintly with residual chaos energy. A reminder of the apocalypse that had just been narrowly avoided. Heroes moved cautiously through the wreckage, their boots crunching over glass and concrete. Every eye scanned the horizon for any sign of Shadow. But he was gone. The ultimate life form, the savior of worlds, had vanished in the final eruption that sealed the rift. All that remained was silence, heavy and aching, broken only by the distant cries of civilians and the low hum of residual energy. Midoriya's gaze swept over the devastation. His knuckles were white as he clenched his hands, and his chest felt tight, a mixture of awe and grief pressing down. He saved us all, he whispered, almost to himself, but the words carried weight, reaching the ears of nearby heroes. He's gone, but he's a hero. Yet, not everyone agreed. Bakugo's brow was furrowed, his usual fire tempered by disbelief. Hero? Ha! He disappeared without a word, without even a chance to explain. How do we know he wasn't just another threat? His voice carried both anger and genuine uncertainty. Other heroes spoke in hushed tones, debates rippling through hero society like a storm. Some praised him, calling him the ultimate protector, a life sacrificed for the greater good. Others whispered suspicions, questioning his motives, his alignment, even whether he had been a hero at all. From the shadows of the wreckage, Midoriya's thoughts drifted to the figure he had come to respect, even fear, in equal measure. Shadow had walked a path that no one else could understand, a life forged in battle, grief, and unending struggle. And now, the consequences of that life lay silent across the city, a city saved but scarred. Weeks passed, reconstruction began, streets patched, buildings stabilized, and the world tried to forget the terror of the chaos cataclysm. But the memory of Shadow lingered, not as a villain, not fully as a hero, but as something in between, a force that had shaped destiny itself. Midoriya often found himself staring at the skies, hoping for a glimpse of the black and red figure that had saved everything at the cost of his existence. Then, it happened. A spike of energy tore through the calm morning, invisible at first, but felt by every quirk-sensitive hero in the city. Instruments at UA went haywire. Alarms blared. Reports flooded in. Readings of a massive concentration of chaos energy. Panic stirred. The old fear rekindled. Midoriya's eyes widened, heart hammering. No, it can't be, he murmured. His mind raced back to Shadow's final words. The quiet resolve. The promise kept to someone long gone. Could it be? Could he have survived? Bakugo's voice snapped him back. What the hell is happening now? All around the city, heroes gathered, instinctively aware that something, or someone, was returning. The air tingled with danger, anticipation, and the faint, unmistakable aura of chaos. Even villains paused in the shadows, sensing a tremor of power that made even them wary. The spike grew stronger, pulsing like a heartbeat against the city, growing in intensity, sending tremors through buildings and streets. People ran, unaware of the full scope of the phenomenon, yet drawn by the primal fear of something beyond comprehension. Midoriya clenched his fists, determination settling into his chest. If Shadow is out there, if he survived, we need to be ready. He may be the only one who can stop what's coming next. And then, from the epicenter of the readings, a faint ripple appeared, dark, flickering, and unmistakable. A shadow in the distance moved against the wind, its form almost too perfect, too composed, despite the energy radiating around it. The city held its breath. Was it a warning, a return, or something entirely new, born from the chaos energy that had once almost destroyed the world? The debate over Shadow's legacy would have to wait. Now, the world faced a new uncertainty, one that blurred the line between hope and fear. Midoriya's voice, steady but charged with emotion, cut through the gathering crowd. The world didn't expect him before, but it will need him again. Shadow isn't gone. Not yet. And as the first tendrils of chaos energy curled into the sky, the city and the heroes stood poised on the edge of a revelation that would change everything. Something had returned. Something powerful. Something the world had never truly understood. A hero. Or something more. The wind carried a whisper across the ruins. The story was far from over. Far beyond the pale blue dot that was Earth, space stretched in endless black. Stars shimmered like distant promises. Galaxies spiraled in slow, infinite dance. And amidst this void, a pulse began to stir, a signal unlike any other. Silent, almost imperceptible, it threaded through the cosmos, cutting through the emptiness with purpose. Shadow opened his eyes. The sensation was disorienting. No ground beneath his feet, no wind brushing past. Only the cold vastness of space, endless and indifferent. His senses were on high alert, yet a strange calmness settled over him, an unusual quiet after the chaos he had left behind. The world he had saved, or tried to, was far below, a fragile sphere glowing with life. He floated in the darkness, observing the blue planet. Cities sparkled faintly, the scars of battle still visible, the streets slowly coming alive again. He could feel the echoes of the people he had encountered, the voices of heroes and civilians alike, resonating through the residual energy. The thought struck him. He had never considered the impact of his actions so directly. He had acted, yes, but for whom? A flicker of light tore through the distance. At first, Shadow thought it was a star, a cosmic accident, but it pulsed with intent. The signal activated, a faint hum vibrating against his consciousness. It was a call, precise and impossible to ignore. Deep within him, something stirred, a recognition of a connection far beyond comprehension. He drifted closer, the pull growing stronger. Shadows of memories danced across his mind. Midoriya's unwavering hope, Maria's face in fleeting recollections, the surge of chaos energy he had wielded to save a world that had never asked for him. Each moment, each choice, had led to this signal, this summons. Perhaps, Shadow murmured to the void. His voice, rarely spoken, echoed in the silence of space. Heroes do exist. It was a whisper, fragile, yet resolute. The words carried weight, a tentative acknowledgement of faith he had long denied himself. Below, the Earth rotated silently, unaware of the figure suspended in orbit, poised between worlds. Shadow's gaze lingered on the horizon, the faint shimmer of city lights mirroring the stars above. There was a pull in his chest, a longing he had not felt since the wars of his origin, a curiosity that threatened to draw him back into a world that had already tried to consume him. The signal pulsed again, stronger this time, resonating with the chaos energy that still lingered in his being. Shadows of energy swirled around him, remnants of the power he had used to save Earth, now stirring with a will of their own. The pull of the multiverse was undeniable, a silent call to witness, to act, or perhaps to return. He extended a hand instinctively, fingers brushing the invisible thread connecting him to that world. It hummed beneath his touch, a resonance that felt alive, aware, almost sentient. And for the first time in centuries, Shadow hesitated. Not out of fear, but consideration. Returning was no longer merely about action or vengeance. It was about choice, about acknowledging the world he had saved and the people who had reached for hope through him. And then, a ripple in the void, subtle, yet unmistakable. Something else stirred in response to the signal, a movement that hinted at forces beyond comprehension, multiversal echoes reacting to the awakening of the ultimate life form. The sense of urgency sharpened. Shadow's instincts, honed over countless battles, flared. Whatever awaited, it was no mere echo. It was a call that demanded attention, a challenge that could not be ignored. He looked down at the blue planet one last time, a soft exhale passing his lips. Perhaps it is time, he said, voice low, contemplative. The hum of chaos energy around him grew, not violent, but alive, as if affirming his resolve. The choice loomed ahead: return, intervene, or drift forever among the stars. A shiver of anticipation coursed through the cosmos, and for a moment, the vast emptiness seemed to hold its breath. Shadow's form shimmered, faint traces of chaos energy radiating outward like a pulse of life in the void. Space itself seemed to bend slightly in recognition, acknowledging a force both feared and revered. Then, as the signal reached its peak, a faint silhouette appeared at the edge of perception, distant yet impossible to ignore. Shadow's eyes narrowed, the faintest flicker of determination igniting within. The pull of Earth, of the heroes he had left behind, grew insistent. The screen of the cosmos went black, and in that darkness, a whisper carried across the void. Perhaps heroes do exist. A pause, a heartbeat, and then silence. The saga was over. Yet everywhere it had touched, the story lingered, unfinished, waiting, echoing across worlds and realities. And somewhere, far above the planet that had once been the stage of chaos and salvation, Shadow drifted, contemplating a return that could reshape the multiverse itself.